I'll start a new metric part file, and I'm going to do my first sketch on the XY plane. I like to turn on the visibility of that center point so I know where it's at. And I'm going to draw a few lines in here. So I'm going to do a line about like that. And then I'm going to come down here at an angle about like that. And then I'm in the line command. I'm going to click and drag. I can bring an arc out here while I'm in the line command. And I want this center of this arc to be on this line. So I'm going to do a coincident between this center point and the line. And I'm going to change the line to a center line type. And so I'll select that and select center line. And then I'm going to do some dimensions. And so remember, if I dimension to that center line, I get the diametral dimension. And so let's make that 20. And I'm going to make this distance, say 30. And then I'm going to make this, let's say 5. And I want to make that a little bigger, so I can just change the dimensions. So these are parametric dimensions. The dimensions drive the model. So as I change the dimension, the size of the geometry changes. Okay, I will do a revolve of this. So I'll do R for revolve, and I'm going to revolve that around the center line. And I think I'll shell out this end. And so I'm going to do shell, and I'll select that face, and I'll just leave it on 1 millimeter, and so I shell that out. I'm going to come up here to my part, and I can change the properties at the part level. And if I come up here, and or I could change it at the solid body level. So I'm going to change the color of it. So I'll go into the properties, or I could change that revolution. Let's go ahead and do the revolution, and then I'll leave the inside of this the shell as gray. And so we'll go to the properties, and I'm going to tell it that I want this to be, let's say, smooth red. And notice now the inside of that stays the original color. That was the shell feature, stays the original color. Alright, I'm going to do another sketch on the front plane. And so I'll start a new sketch, and I want to see inside of this object. So to see inside of it, if I hit F7, that goes into slice graphics mode, where I've cut away the front of this part, and now I can see inside of it. And I'm going to do some sketching on here that I could have it connected to the existing geometry, but what I would prefer to do is have it connected to the first sketch. So I'm going to expand the first feature and turn on the visibility of that first sketch, and then I'll do project geometry, and I'll get that geometry from that first sketch, that line, projected into my part. Now it could be getting the edge of the part or the sketch. So I want to be a little bit careful on how I did that and make sure I got the sketch. And I can check that if I turned off the solid body. So I can right click and turn off the solid body, and then I'm going to turn off sketch number 1. So I've projected this line from sketch number 1, and I should have turned off the solid body if I wanted to make sure I got that sketch 1 to begin with. Let's go back into that slice graphics, and I need to edit my sketch too. So I'll do edit sketch, and I'll hit F7 on the keyboard to go back into slice graphics. And I'm going to do a line from about right here, and I'm going to come down vertically. I'll click and drag that arc over here 180 degrees, and then I'm going to come back up here, and I like to close this off even though it's already closed with the projected geometry. In fact, I'm going to change that projected geometry to construction geometry, and let's put a few dimensions on here. So I'm going to, and I want to dimension from this point up to this point. Whoops, I put a line in there instead of the dimension. So I want to dimension from this point to this point. Now it's not picking up the center of that, so I'll put a point at the midpoint of that line, and now I can do that dimension that I wanted from this point to this point. That horizontal distance, let's say, is 6, and I'm going to make the width of this, I'll make that 3, and then I'm going to dimension from here up to the point, let's say, as 4. Okay. Now notice that this line is at an angle along the part. Alright, I'm going to finish sketch, and so I have this sketch inside here, and I'm going to do an extrude of that sketch, and I'm going to tell it to do cut. I'll go through all, and I'm going to go mid-plane. So I'm putting a cut through this part. Now I want to show you a common problem that people run into, and they don't understand really what happened. Before I do that, I'm going to turn on the visibility of my first sketch, and I want to pattern this slot along this line. Alright, so I'm going to tell it to do a rectangular pattern, and I will select the extruded cut as what I want to pattern. And for the direction, I'm going to select that line, and I'm going to tell it that I want to do those 6 millimeters apart, and I'll tell it to do 3 copies. Okay, so it's going to cut this one and this one, so it previews that cut. I'll go ahead and say OK to this. But when I cut that, notice that it doesn't cut all the way through on this slot and this slot. You know, so that's not cut all the way through. I can't see all the way through here. And here's what happens. When I make this cut, let's see if I can get a preview here to help visualize what's happening. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get what I want. Let's edit this feature. Well, it's cutting the same material out here as though this was going straight along here rather than at that angle. So it's the identical material, so it's trying to pattern that identical material that it cut here and here, but the problem is it's going along this angle. So we need to expand the dialog box and tell it to adjust to the model. So instead of cutting out the identical material that it cut from the first slot, we have to tell it to adjust to the model. And now when I say OK to that, now it's cutting through all the way through the part. And then if I want to mirror that to the other side, then I'll select the original cut and the pattern, and then I will get my mirror plane, and I'll say OK to that. And so now I've cut all the way through. So watch out for that when you are doing a pattern that doesn't go vertically or horizontally. In fact, it will. You can run into that same instance even if the pattern is horizontal or vertical, because the changing in if your geometry is changing, it's going to try to cut that same geometry, and if the rest of your geometry is changing, it's not going to adjust to the rest of the geometry unless you tell it to.